Hey mathematicians, welcome to math lesson number 9. Okay, so we have been adding and subtracting fractions by first lining up the decimal points and then adding or subtracting. Right, so we could take a number like 4.12 and the next number was 2.37. We'd make sure the decimal point lines up. We'd have 2.37. and then we could add those together, and we just add them normally. 2 plus 7 gives us 9, 1 plus 3 gives us 4, 4 plus 2 gives us 6, and then the last thing is that decimal point falls down into our answer. Okay, so we can do that to add or subtract decimals, making sure we're lining them up. But we're mathematicians, and sometimes we like to take a shortcut. So it all comes down to place value. Okay, so we've got our decimal point, and always the decimal point, the whole purpose of it is to show us where the ones column is. So the number that's just to the left of the decimal point is always going to be in the ones column. Okay, and then we know we've got ones, tens, hundreds, thousands. There can only be one ones, so then going the other way, it's tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Okay, so if we know what column the digit is that we are adding or subtracting, we can just make the change in that column. You still see that one? Yes. Okay. So let's say I've got 0.64. and I would like to add 0.1. Okay, so just to the right of the decimal point. So I look up, oh, that is the tenths column. Okay, what digit in 0.64 is also in the tenths column? Hopefully you just said the 6 is also in the tenths column. So we know the only change is going to be in the tenths column unless the numbers we're adding add up to more than 10. But otherwise, all the other digits are going to stay the same, and just the tenths column is going to change. We're adding, so it's going to go up. Okay, so our answer would be 0.74. Okay, the tenths column is going up by 1. Right, what if we had 0.32, and this time we want to add 0.01. Okay, so we look at the column that there is something in here that we're adding, and we can check up there. So we've got tenths and hundredths. So this time we're putting something in the hundredths column. So we look at this number, 0.32, and we figure out which digit is in the hundredths column. Hopefully I'm hearing a rousing chorus of, it's 2, Miss Hughes, that one's in the hundredths column. And then I check my sign, and it's adding, so that means we're going to go up by 1. So all the other digits stay the same. We're not changing the ones column. We're not changing the tenths column. We're just changing the hundredths column. It's got to go up by 1, 0.33. Okay, works exactly the same if we are subtracting. So I have 0.72, and this time I'd like to subtract 0.1. Once again, I check what place value is this. It's one spot to the left. One spot to the right, so that makes it in the tenths column. So I look at this number and I figure out which digit is in the tenths column. Hopefully you're saying it's the 7. All the other digits are going to stay the same. I look at the sign, they're asking us to subtract, which means this time we're going to go down by 1. Okay, so we're not changing the ones column, but the tenths column has to go down by 1. we're not changing the hundredths column. Well, that could be pretty speedy. All right. A couple more. Okay. What if I have 0.51 and I'm going to subtract 0.01? Okay, you should be onto this by now. I checked to see what column this is in. Ones, tenths, hundredths. Keep that up. You can see that. Okay, so then I look at 0.51. What digit is in the hundredths place? It's the 1. I check my sign. It's subtracting, so we're going to go down by 1. Okay, so here's my answer. The ones column doesn't change. The tenths column doesn't change. This time the only thing is the hundredths column goes down by 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. All right. I think we're going to have to erase that. Okay, let's try another one here. So what do I have? 3.27 plus 1. Okay, so we check to see what column this digit is in. It doesn't have a decimal point, so any number that we don't put the decimal point in means it's going to be to the right of that number, right? So this is going to be in the ones column. So then we could look at the number 3.27 and we figure out which digit is also in the ones column. It's the 3, Miss Hughes, it's the 3. Okay, and then I look at the sign. It's adding, so that means we're going to go up by 1. Okay, so the ones column is going to change. It's going to go up by 1. The tenths column does not change, and the hundredths column does not change. All right, so hopefully that's pretty easy. A sneaky quick way of adding and subtracting decimals if you're only changing by either 1.1 or 0.001. Makes things super speedy. Now this place value chart can also be helpful if we need to compare two numbers. Okay, so let's say we had the number 427 and we wanted to compare it with the number 437. So I want to know which one of those is going to be bigger. So I've lined them up. Remember, our imaginary decimal point is in here, so we line them up on the right. And we know that hundreds are bigger than tens, right? Hundreds are bigger than tens are bigger than ones are bigger than tenths. So we start out with the biggest thing, because that's going to make the biggest difference. Okay, so the hundredths column matches. Then we check the, oh, I've got this in the wrong spot, don't I? Okay, so the hundredths column matches. The tens column, oh, that is our first change. Okay, so we could circle that that's where the change occurs. And at that point, we can just look and see which number is higher. Whichever number is the higher, that's going to be the biggest. Which in a math textbook would probably say greater. Okay, so now what if we are comparing decimals? Line this up again. Okay, so what instead of 427, what instead we had 4.27, and I want to compare it to 4.37. You notice that by putting all the digits in the columns that they belong in, I've lined up the decimal points, right? Because we know that that's how it's really important that we line up the numbers. It's really by the decimal point. Okay, and then we start from the left as well, because we know in our place value system, always the most left number, most left column anyway, is going to have the biggest amount. So ones are bigger than tenths, which are bigger than hundredths. So we start looking in the ones column. They're the same. So then we start moving over, tenths column. Oh, here we have found our differences. Again, the 3 is bigger than the 2, so this number is going to be greater. Okay. All right, so there's a couple of other things you're going to need for the next couple of math pages. Okay, one is they're going to ask you to do a little bit of rounding. And remember, the roundest number we know, 0 the hero. So that means we're basically trying to get to a nice, easy number. So if we were rounding the number 42, and I asked you to round it to the nearest 10th, then the nearest 10, so we're looking at 42, and we try to imagine a number line. Oh boy, I just snuck that one in there. And we're trying to figure out whether the number we're looking at, is it going to be closer to the group of 10 that's below it, or is it going to be closer to the group of 10 that's above it, right? So if we want to round to the closest 10, we look next door. And if you remember, if it's 4 or lower, we're going to round down. So by rounding down, that means we're going to go to the group of 10 that is smaller than that number on the number line. Okay, so it would round to 40. And then if this second number, oh, that really doesn't work, does it? If this second number was a 5 or higher, then we would round it up to the group of 10 that's above it. Okay, so 45 would round to 50. Okay, rounding when it's decimals is the same idea. So if they're asking you to round to the closest whole number, and you've got 1.2, then you need to imagine the number line that starts at 1.0 and goes up to 2.0. You've got to figure out where on that number line 1.2 is. Here it would be here. Is it closer to 1.0 or is it closer to 2.0? Oh, look, this number is 4 or less. That tells us we're going to round down, so it's going to be closest to 1. Okay. So Blue Book folks, you can zip to the end if you want to find out what your math work is going to be, or you can just hang on for the ride and join in a little bit with the Green Book folks. Okay, so Green Book folks, you need to move on to our last decimal column that we've been talking about lately, which is the thousandths. So we've been playing with the cake as being one whole, right? So this would be, in the past, we've said this is one whole, and then this would be 1/100th of that cake. Okay, but if now we're talking about thousandths, all of a sudden this is our whole. Oh my goodness. So we're not just having one little cake, we're having a giant 10-layer cake. And so now 1,000th is this little guy. Okay, so there, if we had 1,000 of these little ones, we could put it together to make this big one. Okay, so we would write the number 1,000th by checking out our lovely chart here. So we know there's going to be a decimal point here. 1,000th has nothing in the ones column, nothing in the tens column, tenths column, nothing in the hundredths column, and it'll have 1 in the thousandths column. Okay. If I wanted to write that as a fraction, I have one piece out of, this time my cake has a possible 1,000 pieces. Oh my goodness. Okay, so what if I had 25 of those little pieces? My fraction would be 25 out of a possible 1,000 pieces, and I have to figure out how to write that as a decimal point. Oh, okay. Well, it would be really a pain to count out 25 of those little pieces. Okay, so we could model that. 1, 2, 3. There we are. There's 5 thousandths. And then, man, I really don't want to start counting out 10 of the... Oh, what if I just did that? Okay, so that'll be another 10 of those pieces. Oh, and I need 25 of them, so I've got the 5. Okay, so I've got 25 of those pieces. Oh, well, the next question is how many of these does it take to fill up one of those? And it's going to be, there's 10 of them in each spot, and there's 10 layers. 10 times 10 is 100th. Okay, so this here is really saying that I've got 2 out of 100. And this one is saying that I've got 5 out of 1,000. So that means in the hundredths column, I'm going to need a 2. In the thousandths column, I'm going to need a 5. I don't have any tenths, and I don't have any ones. Just about called them once. Okay, all right, so 25 out of 1,000 would be 0.025. Okay, now you might notice, hey, wait a second, you can always just put the right hand digit into the thousandths column. Okay, so if we try another one, right, so if we put the 7, we know automatically there's going to be 7 little thousandths in there, and then we just, whatever number's next to it goes next door. I'm out of numbers. I need to add 0 to the hero to make sure that 7 actually ends up in the thousandths, and I don't have any whole cakes. So 37 out of 1,000 would be 0.037. All right, I think you should know everything you need to know to be able to do your math for this week, other than what is the math you're going to do this week. So if you've got a green math book, this week you're going to do page 243 and page 244. If you have a blue math book, you're going to do page 279 and 280. All right, happy mathing!